They say we first eat with our eyes. I guess that's true here in our case most especially. When I'm painting food, I tell myself I want to be able to capture and devour the details, to be able to show it right. But how do we do that? What makes our mouth water when we look at this? What makes us want to drink this? Is it the color? Is it the texture? Is it the way the steam seems to float right above it as if it's asking us to come closer for a whiff? Maybe it's all of that combined. It's about being able to let our viewers remember what it smells like and tastes like just by looking at it. The goal for this tutorial is to replicate that sensation in our paintings, to make our viewers crave. And in order to do that, we must first start with getting the cut. Like cooking actual food, you must have an eye for measurement. You must know the amount of ingredients you need, the size and weight of what you're going to add to the dish, and also how you'll plate them. We can do this by starting our painting with making it clear to us where everything is by focusing on the silhouettes rather than the details. Ignore everything else for now. Lessen the details in your mind as you look at it. Observe the shape and get the important features it has that immediately tells you it's what it is. This is because our eyes already know what it's looking at even before color, light, smell, and everything else comes into place. Let me show you what I mean. This, as you know, is an egg. This is definitely a chicken drumstick. This is a piece of shrimp. And this is a slice of cheese. We do this in order to ensure that we can tell what it is even before we truly work on it. They're divided, laid out, and presented in a way our eyes can understand it in a second. When we combine all of this together in our canvas, and I guess it'll be appropriate to say that when we plate it, it can already give us a sense of what it will look like even before we finish. Once we have it all set, we can then move on to something that needs a bit of color theory working with us. This is because color changes how appetizing food can be. Let me show you what I mean. This doesn't look as appetizing as this. This isn't much unless we do this. This would look so much better if we did this. Because now we need to identify where in the color wheel do these items belong to. We must understand their temperature and how people would prefer having them served to them. This is when we talk about making it look hot or cold. When we're trying to categorize our food, try to imagine the last time you had it. Was it for dessert? Was it for dinner? Or was it just a snack? This can already give us an idea of what lighting to use and what colors to work with. Food is served differently depending on what our cook wants to project. Try looking at photographs of food for practice. Notice that some look a lot cooler than others and some just makes you feel like it'll just warm you up right then and there. Something warm would be on this side of the color wheel, and something cold will be on this other half. From here, we will already know which colors to work with. When you do this, consider lighting as well. This is the part where you practice what we've learned from our previous tutorial video. Remember that? We talked about the practice of dividing your colors. If you haven't seen that video yet, check it out. I'll link it down below. When we divide the colors, we start to make our cuts have a bit more form and depth. Like for this one, I want to show how thick our meat is exactly. And for this one, I want to show how curved the bottom part is compared to that sliced open front. Once we've done this, we start coloring it in. Observe the colors from your reference photo or from your memory. Try to see where one color begins and ends and use your strokes to clearly illustrate it. This is where we start to focus on texture. And it's always important to know which tools can help us get to the appropriate look and feel of our food. So now it's time for us to talk about the importance of knowing your brushes. Smooth, crumbly, chunky, soft, and maybe glazed. How do we illustrate all of this? We take a look at the brushes available to us. Texture is so important when it comes to food because this gives us an idea of how it will feel when we take a bite into it. Just by looking at food, you can already tell if it's soft, hard, and everything else. So we must figure out what brushes to use to get the right sensation. When I paint rice, I go for this brush here. This is because the rice needs to be slightly translucent to create uneven textures. When I make charred meat, I go for this brush. It creates those cracks you're looking for to show a bit of crunch. Making bread's entirely different though. I want to show cracks, but I also don't want it to look like it's burnt. So I use a smaller circular textured brush, like this one. Don't forget that you can change its opacity. This may sound technical, but it's worth remembering. Like for this one, I want this covered in butter. And the only way to ensure that is if it fades just a little bit right over here. Nothing is even when it comes to food, so try your best to create more organic movements. It may look smooth, but if you look closely, there are details worth including to really make that painting better. Go in different directions and layer them out one at a time. There's no shortcut here, except to take advantage of our tools and figure out ways to imitate their look. Take note as well of the sizes of your brush you're using. Like for this one, I would use a thicker and more solid brush. And for stuff like this, I go for a textured thin brush and I allow the tips to fade in so it will look like it's sinking into the broth. Now that our portions are all set, our colors are all in, and our textures are all done, this is when we put the cherry on top. Literally, sometimes. But this is when we make the food really stand out and make it look more real and appealing. This is when we study when to add gloss and where to add our highlights. This is when we distinguish if our meal's wet or dry. This part is important because these are our last details that can really make our paintings look complete and appetizing. First, you gotta know how much this particular food or ingredient reflects light. When we do this, identify your light source and try to see if light will either pass through it, bounce off of it, miss it entirely, or if it's in the perfect spot to receive some defined gloss. Here, like for these donuts, you can see that I'm trying to show which ones are the wet areas and which ones are the dry areas. For the chocolate, the glaze, and the toppings, I added thick white strokes to really show that they're reflective. But for the portions of the actual donut, I avoided putting highlights because they are our dry ingredients. Let's now look at this example. As you can see, the highlight emphasizes that this egg isn't overcooked. It shows that it's oozing out just a bit, so we add more gloss. But we also have cases like this. This apple has a lot of reflective areas, not because it's categorized as wet, but because it has a smooth surface. So consider that when you're working on your highlights. If things are starting to look good, then you're now understanding how important adding proper lighting is to your painting. And that's the thing. This doesn't just apply to food. The more you practice this, the more you understand where and when to put strong or subtle highlights to further emphasize the material of your paintings. You can use this for portraits, for any item you're painting, and even for making landscapes. We'll talk about that some more on our upcoming tutorial video, how to paint mountains, and also how to paint neon portraits. But right now, try and practice all these techniques with food. You see, painting food has the ability to teach us how to have more control over the effect of our paintings. It teaches us how to better ourselves in building sensations just by how well we have illustrated it. Painting food trains us to be more accurate with our strokes, but also more expressive with our colors. Because like a painting, like a sculpture, or even like music, food is a form of art that demands an audience. With these techniques, we can make our audience feel what we want them to feel. And with enough practice, you'll be making art that looks good enough to eat. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you love what you're seeing so far by hitting that like button. And if you want to send over some love over my way, go on ahead and hit subscribe. It will really help this channel grow. Now I gotta go get something to eat. I'll see you next time.